the world's leading bank robbers. That's what US officials are calling North Korean hackers, who stole nearly $2 billion of cryptocurrency in 2022. Despite being one of the most closed societies in the world, North Korea has unexpectedly found itself in the middle of a cryptocurrency revolution. The regime's ongoing efforts to become a nuclear state, which it believes will prevent it from falling, has put the country under 2 decades of heavy UN sanctions. Natural disasters, food shortages, and the COVID-19 pandemic have only made matters worse. With its very survival at stake, the regime turned to cryptocurrency to evade sanctions, investing in a group of highly skilled hackers that would go on to steal from banks and crypto exchanges, a crucial source of income for a country that only had a GDP of $25 billion in 2022. It was reported that North Korea had also drastically stepped up its crypto mining efforts, specifically in Monero. On top of that, cybersecurity experts found that North Korean hackers were sneaking malware into people's computers with the aim to mine Monero and send it back to the country. So the question is, why Monero in particular, and what makes it so attractive to criminal organizations like the North Korean regime?
I do own Bitcoin.
Something like Bitcoin.
It's a common misconception that Bitcoin is totally anonymous. Due to Bitcoin's open source nature, it's actually relatively easy to trace transactions back to the original source. This makes Bitcoin, along with most cryptocurrencies, even more traceable than cash. Monero aims to solve this by offering 2 main features: private transactions on a secure network. All transactions on Monero are kept private using 3 different privacy technologies: ring signatures, which hides the sender's identity, ring CT, which hides how much Monero has been sent, and stealth addresses, which hides the recipient. Next is security, and Monero aims to achieve this by being as decentralized as possible. This allows users to transact without having to trust anyone else on the network, and makes the blockchain more resistant to attacks. Monero does this by being one of the few remaining blockchains that still use a proof of work consensus, which it calls RandomX. This consensus method allows anyone with computing resources to operate nodes and mine XMR, Monero's native token. It also makes Monero ASIC resistant, ASICs being computers that only have one purpose, which is to mine. ASICs are much more efficient at mining than regular computers, to the point that it usually becomes unprofitable to mine without one. However, there are only a few companies that make them, and this has led to concerns over centralization on Bitcoin and Ethereum, where a small number of mining farms dominate the mining process with their exclusive access to ASICs. Monero avoids this by constantly changing the mining algorithm, removing any advantage that the ASIC miners have. This theoretically makes the network more difficult to attack, since all miners are on a level playing field and control of the mining process is spread more evenly. The decentralized nature of the network combined with its privacy technologies make Monero near impossible to regulate. And that's why XMR is increasingly being used for illicit transactions instead of Bitcoin. It's easier for the North Korean regime to launder money without detection, and harder for governments around the world to track the movement of funds. Seeing it as a threat, the US government has even offered hundreds of thousands of dollars to anyone who can crack Monero's code. Rumor has it that Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, wrote Monero's white paper, and Monero's codebase is of Russian origin. However, what's certain is that Monero's roots can be traced back to when an unknown individual, named Thankful for Today, forked Bitcoin, another privacy-focused blockchain, but has since declined in popularity. This fork became BitMonero, but was short-lived as Thankful for Today was kicked out by the community over disagreements about the direction of the project. 7 developers took over, made another fork, and this officially marked the launch of Monero in 2014.
Thankful for Today is kind of like our Satoshi, except a gigantic douchebag that we kicked out because he was a gigantic douchebag.
Out of the 7 developers, only 2 have revealed their identities: Riccardo Spagni, the lead maintainer, and David Latapai, the European director for Monero. Riccardo Spagni stepped down from his role in 2019 as a bid to promote decentralization, and since then, the blockchain has been maintained by hundreds of active developers in the community. On an unrelated note, Spagni has since been extradited to South Africa to face charges of fraud against a biscuit company, his former employer. Unlike the majority of blockchain projects seen today, Monero didn't have a token sale or pre-mine when it was launched. Instead, those wanting to invest in the project had to initially mine XMR. The maximum supply of Monero is uncapped, and there's a fixed emission rate of 0.6 XMR. This means miners are rewarded 0.6 XMR for every block they validate, plus the fees gained from transactions. This constant block reward, which is known as the tail emission, creates an inflation rate of less than 1%, coming down towards 0% over time as supply grows. Having a fixed emission guarantees miners a predictable income, regardless of the transaction fee market. And Monero believes that this permanent incentive over the long term will keep the network secure, allowing it to scale better and keep transaction fees reasonably low. It's also thought that low fees will encourage people to use Monero as a currency. This is in contrast to Bitcoin, where eventually mining rewards will go to zero, and the security of a network will depend entirely on user transaction fees. It's predicted that higher transaction fees will be needed to keep mining competitive, otherwise the network could see a drop in the number of miners, leaving it vulnerable to attack. The emphasis on security and decentralization means that transactions on Monero can take up to 30 minutes. But despite the launch of new user-friendly projects that offer faster transaction speeds, Monero still dominates the privacy market. Zcash and Dash, Monero's biggest competitors, offer selective privacy, so users have to opt in to make their transactions private. This potentially makes them more regulator-friendly than Monero, but on the other hand less secure. A member of the Zcash team even mentioned the possibility of adding a backdoor to the project for authorities to track criminal activity. Although Zcash denies that this feature exists, it does suggest that there is a degree of traceability on the network. On top of that, there have been concerns over centralization on the Zcash and Dash networks, with the developers and team owning a significant share of tokens. Monero's ASIC resistance gives it an edge over its competitors, not only encouraging decentralization on its network, but also wider adoption. XMR can be mined by anyone with a normal computer and an internet browser, but this feature has also been exploited by those who engage in cryptojacking, which is the unauthorized use of someone else's computer to secretly mine crypto. Malicious software is used to gain access to the computer and exploit its processing power to mine for the hacker. And this usually results in slower computer performance and higher electricity bills for the victim. It was reported that nearly 5% of all Monero had been mined from cryptojacking. So, would you invest in Monero? Considering Monero's privacy features and anonymity, it's easy to see why crime syndicates have taken a liking to it. Transactions on the blockchain are untraceable, and for the North Korean regime, that's allowed them to evade international sanctions and launder money. But with the introduction of CBDCs and increasing regulation in the crypto industry, more and more regular people are turning to Monero as a way to keep their transactions private. Despite its limited scalability and transaction speeds, Monero is by far the most used and trusted privacy coin. This can be seen in its market cap, which is larger than that of its two biggest competitors, Zcash and Dash combined. At the same time, its privacy features also make Monero impossible to regulate and one of the least ESG compliant assets. As a result, XMR isn't listed on all major exchanges and is unlikely to achieve the same level of adoption as Bitcoin and Ethereum. However, Monero has carved out a niche for itself and is likely to remain a popular choice for those seeking anonymity. As long as it can't be cracked, there will always be a demand for Monero. If you found this video useful, then be sure to drop a like. And if you want to learn more about the fundamentals behind other crypto projects, then hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for your next dose of crypto beans.